Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Reframing Eye Care podcast. I am your host, Dr. Maria Sampoulos. Today's guest is Dr. Kaleb Abbott. He's been on the podcast many times talking about dry eye. And today we're shifting gears on his latest study in the industry about burnout. So for those of you that have not had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Abbott, he's an optometrist and assistant professor at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. He practices a dry eye clinic and is also a researcher. Recently did a study on burnout, which is so important in eye care lately. A lot of optometrists burning out. It is a prevalent topic. So I wanted to have you on and talk about this. Can you tell us how did you switch gears and start a study on burnout?
Yes, well, first off, thank you for having me, Maria. But yes, so I was starting to feel quite burnt out in my job, trying to handle all the responsibilities of being in clinic and doing research and family life. It can be a challenge for all of us. And I started really just wondering, is this common? Are there other people out there that feel like I feel, that are burnt out, that are kind of having a hard time with work-life balance? So being a researcher and asking that question, I decided, maybe we should launch a large-scale study to figure out what the prevalence of burnout is in optometry and what are the risk factors associated with that. And I'll say that if you're burnt out, launching a study trying to figure out the prevalence of burnout does not improve your burnout.
Yeah. Well, you're a high achiever. So, I mean, I think high achievers, do experience it. They try to take on more, do more because they're passionate. They have that motivation. But let's talk about it. What is burnout?
So to clarify, we're talking about professional burnout because you can have many different types of burnout. But in the setting of professional burnout, we're talking about having emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and a reduced sense of personal achievement at work. And there's a difference between normal stress and stress that is really becoming a problem. So when we're talking about stresses in life, this is a continuum. You can have normal stress, and then that can proceed to the feeling of burnout into exhaustion. So when it comes to kind of normal acute stress, we're talking about the sympathetic nervous system. We're talking about fight or flight. We're talking about epinephrine and norepinephrine and things like that. And this is a stress that happens and then calms down very quickly. But when we're talking about chronic stress, we're talking about something completely different. We're talking about the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis. And this is the pathway of chronic stress in the body, which is really governed by cortisol release.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, cortisol release, doctors, see an increase in, medical things like high blood pressure, weight around the abdomen, puffy face, things like that. It's hard,
Yes.
hard to function, foggy, right?
Hmm.
I think we know a lot of doctors have experienced that.
Hmm.
Why is
Totally.
burnout such a problem? Why does it really impact practitioners and patients?
Yeah, so one of the first questions I was asking myself is burnout actually a problem? Because I think a lot of us, we go to work, we want to work hard, we want to help our patients, and we know that, being stressed comes with the job, that this is kind of what we asked for when we decided to go into healthcare. So I was trying to figure out, is burnout actually a problem? What does it lead to? But we do see that when it comes to burnout, it does negatively impact providers. It negatively impacts patients and the healthcare system, which I think we'll talk about in a moment. But burnout is, specifically a problem in healthcare. So healthcare has about twice the rate of burnout as pretty much every other profession in the United States. So it's estimated that about 35 to 50% of healthcare providers are experiencing symptoms of burnout. So when it comes to practitioners, so with practitioners, we see increased job turnover, reduced productivity, higher rates of medical errors, more malpractice lawsuits if you're burnt out, things like substance abuse, depression, suicidal ideation, and just overall decreased quality of life. When it comes to patients and kind of how they are impacted by provider burnout, we find that patients that have a provider that is burnt out report lower patient satisfaction, they're less likely to adhere to medical advice, and there's worse patient outcomes. Then it affects the clinics, it affects teamwork, communication, and compromises patient care in that sense. And then it affects the overall healthcare system too. We see that it increases healthcare expenditures. It leads to an increased and unnecessary number of referrals, an increase in unnecessary diagnostic testing, higher costs related to staff, and then additional resources that are needed to manage the effects of provider burnout.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit how you conducted the study. I'd like to learn more because these are all important things that you're telling. It's pretty prevalent. Extra testing, patient dissatisfaction. These are real things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we were trying to figure out how we wanted to do this study, we're trying to figure out what surveys are used to measure burnout in the United States, specifically amongst healthcare providers. And what we found is there's one survey called the Mini-Z survey that is commonly used. In fact, it had actually been used in our department before to measure burnout in ophthalmology, which was really interesting. So we decided we're just going to use that same survey, but we're going to modify the second page of it to include a lot more questions about demographics, practice settings, family life, things like that, trying to get a better sense of what sort of things are related to burnout. We actually distributed this survey through the American Academy of Optometry to, I think it was 6,300 members through AAO. We distributed it through your platform, so Corporate Optometry, distributed through ODs on Facebook, ODs on Finance, many different organizations, the Ocular Wellness and Nutrition Society. So thank you to all the organizations that let us use their network to share the survey. And then we collected all of these responses from providers via a website called RedCap, which lets us collect all of this data and then analyze it and then run statistics on it.
Yeah. Tell us the key findings from the study. I know you got a lot of doctors from all the groups and the academy. So it's great to have that diverse network, but what are the big findings?
Yeah, well, we ended up with about 1,441 responses, which we thought was a tremendous response rate. So we were pretty happy with that. The overall burnout rate in optometry in the United States was 53.6%. So about 54% of optometrists are experiencing symptoms of burnout, which is huge. That puts us, if we were to look at other healthcare professions, that puts us at the top of all the other healthcare professions. So we're kind of still in the range, but we are experiencing burnout kind of at the worst end of that range. So 61% of optometrists have mild symptoms of burnout, 30% have moderate symptoms of burnout, and 8% have severe symptoms of burnout. And burnout was notably higher amongst women as compared to men.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you go into deep why, certain demographics, practice setting, career factors, women, why is all that?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of whys. So we have to keep the survey to a manageable length. So you can only ask so many questions. The more questions you ask, the less likely it is that people actually finish filling it out. So our initial goal was to just understand what the prevalence is and then ask kind of questions that are like demographic and practice characteristics to figure out what's associated with that burnout. So we don't necessarily have answers as to why women experience more burnout than men, but we know that it's pretty significant. So women, about 61% of women report symptoms of burnout as compared to 41% of men.
Yeah. And what about the practice settings? I mean, there's a lot of different practice settings. How did that compare?
Yeah, I think this one is quite interesting. So when we look at the settings that have the most burnout, number one is teleoptometry. Having said that, we only had 3 providers that worked in teleoptometry settings that answered the survey. So not really a great response rate there. So hard to glean a lot from that data. So when we factor that out, we see hospital settings, integrative care settings, so like Kaiser or the VA, or I'm from Texas, so Kelsey-Seybold, and then ophthalmology departments. So it goes really hospital, integrative care settings, and departments of ophthalmology have the highest rates of burnout. Kind of in the middle, what we see is commercial settings and then ODMD settings. And then the practices that have the lowest amounts of burnout are private practices, so solo, small, and large, and then also departments of optometry, so optometry schools.
I think just looking at the data, we say hospital, ophthalmology department, like it's high risk patients, a lot of disease.
Yes.
And then the corporate setting, maybe there's a lot of patients we have to see in a certain period of time. Some might be more demanding on expectations on times and waits. And and things like that, and costs. And then the private practice, maybe because you can control the days you want to work and how many you want, that might be the reason. But doctors will complain about private practice too, because they have all that admin things that they do. But I think
That's
maybe
so
they
true.
take a day for that as well.
And there's a difference between burnout and job satisfaction. So interestingly, they're generally related. But if you look at where I work, so I work in a department of ophthalmology at the University of Colorado. Ophthalmology departments have the highest rates of burnout, but actually the highest levels of job satisfaction. So we might be burnt out because we're liking the work. It's high acuity. It's challenging us. We keep working more and more and more. Then we become burnt out, but we're satisfied with the job.
Yeah, I think if you have a spouse that's in healthcare, it's probably easier. They understand what your what your work is, because they do the same thing. What about
Yes.
career length? Like in the study, was it early? Was it later? Did income have a satisfaction or burnout with this?
Yeah, so we found that those that had the lowest amounts of burnout were either early in their career, so practicing 5 years or less out, or practicing 30 years or more. So there's kind of a honeymoon period when you first get out of optometry school. You're making money, things are great, you're happy, you're not that burnt out, and then you have this kind of mid-career from 5 years to 29 years that you're much more likely to be burnt out. And then if you're still practicing 30 years or longer, you're typically less likely to be burnt out. We also found that those with a higher income, so earning more than $200,000 a year, were less likely to be burnt out. And we did not find any association with race or ethnicity or different regions of the United States. And then also those who had done a residency, particularly a residency in primary care, were more likely to be burnt out.
Yeah, those are all some good things. I think they all resonate when you kind of look at yourself and where I'm at. Is burnout linked to all sorts of other problems too? Like what else brings it? I know doctors complain about, vision plans maybe can't get on to get, benefits. EMR shuts down.
Yes.
Staffing, like it's just, things are just difficult in general. It's hard to get good staff too. Does that link anything to burnout?
Yeah, the mini Z survey has certain questions that are standardized that they ask. So we don't know specifically about vision plans, although I would assume that that's a major source of burnout. But we do know that burnout in general is linked to higher job stress, more use of EHR at home. So you have to take your work home with you and have to chart at home. Insufficient time for documentation, lack of control over workload, a hectic work environment, lower team efficiency, and then people who are burnt out are less likely to feel like their own values align with the leadership at their private practice or optometry school or department of ophthalmology.
Yeah. Oh. No, these are all great things. I mean, this definitely makes sense. I mean, burnout is big deal in eye care. It really is. And
Totally.
it's nice to kind of just see it's not just one sector, it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the younger doctors, I think, control it better, where they're like, look, I'm only working 4 days a week. I'm not working Saturdays. I'm not, where the older doctors would take those things. I think it's a generation thing. But maybe this
Yes.
generation knows better than we do, right? To kind of do that. So
Yeah, I think that there is some wisdom kind of with that shift there, because probably the biggest thing that we found, what is most associated with burnout, is the number of half days that you're spending in clinic per week. So on average, those with severe burnout were in clinic 4.2 days per week. Those with mild burnout were in clinic 4 days a week. Those with no burnout were in clinic 3.8 days a week. And then also the number of patients you see in a half day was very closely linked with burnout. So kind of the trend of, not being in patient care a full 5 days a week and maybe taking an extra half day for admin time or for U time is definitely associated with less burnout.
yeah, no, I think that's important. Those things, right? I think, sometimes in the corporate setting, some locations are required to open 7 days a week, and
Mhm.
it's fine over the years because you would have doctors fill in and things like that. But now it's just such a shortage. It's hard to do that, and then
Yes.
Saturdays usually are just packed, right? And patients walking in, and you're trying to make everybody happy.
Yes.
And it's
And
hard when you want to do that, right? You want to do a good job, but you want to, work with the company that you're with, and you have expectations and you want to do it, but certain times of the year are busier than others. But the more patients we see, dissatisfaction and RX checks and a lot of other things, like you said, are really prevalent.
oh yeah, and I mean, there's a difference between working 6 or 7 days a week for a certain period of time versus doing it, your entire career. So I mean, when I came out of optometry school, I was routinely working 6 days, sometimes 7 days a week, as I was trying to pay off student loans and things like
Yeah.
that. And I did that for a period of time, and I was young. I didn't have kids. I had a lot of energy. I had the drive to work that many days, and then but doing something like that over the course of a decade, 2 decades, really can put a lot of stress on the body. Then I think it's important to end up shifting into areas that you love within optometry. So I started shifting more from just working everywhere I could to shifting more into dry eye, ocular surface disease, and research. And then I get a lot of personal fulfillment out of that. So I'm less likely to be burnt out now that I'm doing what I love.
No, I mean, I think a lot of doctors, did the same thing for 20 years, like 5, 6 days a week, pay down debt, get where I want to go. I mean, it wasn't as easy, right? And
Hmm.
what the goal was. And sometimes because it's hard to have your own business or what your expectations are, or because of your financial burden of debt, starting a family, having a house, like it's just so much at the beginning that some doctors
It
will do
is.
that, which was kind
Oh
of
yeah.
nice within the corporate setting because like, all right, I feel like working Columbus Day, we're off, I can work and see a bunch of patients. Some of the fill-in positions were great because the sublease owner was like, you want to work 4 hours? I'd be like, yeah, it'd be perfect. Just see
Hmm.
patients. And some of the patients were mostly routine. So it was great where, now you see a lot of geriatric, it's more complex. You have to double check, make sure you're not missing something.
Hmm.
So it is, you're right. I mean, these are real things that a lot of doctors experience, right? A lot of doctors
Totally.
work a lot of hours just to kind of pay off that debt. It's especially with interest rates being high, like you have to kind of tackle it quickly.
Yes.
Um, what are certain factors like are proactive in burnout while others are associated with burnout? Can you just give us a summary for the listeners here on the podcast?
Yeah, so kind of a final summary of our study, which was the largest nationwide study ever done for burnout in the United States. So, protective factors for burnout. Uh, Being a man, having children, interestingly. So, those with children were less likely to have professional work related burnout. Having a short commute to work, so 15 minutes or less, or actually a very long commute, so 60 minutes or more, because uh, that is possibly kind of me time. Like a lot of times people choose to have a long commute because they see having a long commute as time for themselves to listen to a podcast, to give their friends a phone call or family members a phone call. Having a spouse or partner in healthcare decreases your risk of burnout. Being early in your career, less than 5 years, or late in your career, 30 or more years, and then working in private practice or academic settings. And then risk factors for burnout. So being a woman, not having kids, being mid career, so 5 to 29 years, high patient volume, more days in clinic per week, using EHR, commuting anywhere from 15 minutes to 59 minutes, and then working in settings like commercial or hospital based departments of ophthalmology or integrated care settings. Those are the things that we found are either risk factors or protective for burnout.
No, these are all great things. I mean, the profession's 70% females, right? So we're
Yes.
gonna, so I mean, that's a big deal. And they have a lot of responsibilities at the house too, even with spouses. I mean, the
Hmm.
spouses take most of the responsibility and
Yes.
kind of have, but it's still real, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
it's a lot. We take care of people during the day. We take in a lot of negative, like complaints, right? What they're in for. And
Oh yeah.
and then you go home, and then it depends on what's going on. Like when my kids were younger, they needed me more, right? You needed to
Hmm.
do more, right? Your kids are little, like you have to feed them, change that. You're
Yes.
constant, right? You're constant. Now it's like it's other issues, and they're older, but I'm like, I don't know how to do geometry. I'm sorry, guys. Like stuff like to
There's
help
always
them.
something.
There's always something. It's just a different level of stress, right?
Hmm.
So it helps. What are some final thoughts to our listeners to take home and encouragement for optometrists for supportive environments?
Yeah, so I guess what we learned from our study, which was published earlier this year, is that burnout is really a serious concern in optometry. The burnout rates are alarming. We're talking about over half of optometrists experiencing symptoms of burnout. This puts us as kind of one of the top professions for burnout, and certainly at the top of healthcare for burnout. It's especially bad for women right now for whatever reason. We know that women, about 61% of them experience symptoms of burnout compared to only 41% of men. And like you said, this is going to become a bigger problem as our workforce in optometry is shifting more from being male dominated to now female dominated. So I think it's 71% of new optometry students are female. We really need more research to better understand ways to mitigate burnout. And then we need to try to figure out ways to kind of prioritize wellness and ways to kind of figure out what is causing burnout in our own personal lives on an individual level, and then ways that we can reduce it.
Yeah.
Because it does impact not just us, but it impacts our patient care too. And in the end, we're all optometrists to try to help patients. And if we're burnt out, we can't adequately help our patients.
Yeah. You defined what burnout was, you defined what demographics, how we get there, but you never talked about like the chronic stress on the sympathetic system and chronic stress on that activates HPA axis and cortisol. Can we go into that just so our listeners understand like what to look for and what to know? Because that takes a toll on our bodies. And if we're going to see patients for 30, 40 years, some 40 years, and we have to be healthy to do so, to take care of ourselves, to be able to take care of other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a great book that Netta Joya, the past president of the Ocular Wellness and Nutrition Society, told me about. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And the book is really interesting because it's talking about the difference between acute stress that zebras experience versus chronic stress that humans experience. Zebras aren't thinking about their 401k. They're not thinking about retirement. They're not thinking about funding their kids' colleges or things like that. Zebras think, oh my goodness, there's a lion right there, run away. Okay, good, the lion's gone. I'm no longer stressed anymore. And that's kind of the extent of zebra stress. And so that's working along kind of that fight or flight mentality, the sympathetic nervous system. So you have a stressor, this increases release of epinephrine and norepinephrine, and it spikes in your body. And then it goes down very, very quickly. And that's kind of the stress that in general, like animals like zebras experience. Humans are kind of unique in that we have all of these chronic stressors. So a lot of us aren't, when it's coming to stress, we're not talking about acute stress. We're talking about chronic stress that's building and building and building, that's really going on for decades. And this leads to many problems for us. And this is happening through that HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And this leads to cortisol release. And it's this cortisol release that leads to lots and lots of problems for us. So it downregulates your immune system. It affects your genetic expression that's trying to help you fight off disease and things like that. It causes insulin resistance, weight gain, causes mood disorders, visceral fat accumulation, causes all of these problems for us. So in general, like when we think about chronic stress, we're talking about it impacting the body, the mind, the emotions, and our behaviors. So the body, it's making you ill. It's causing poor sleep, headaches, fatigue, skin problems. When it comes to the mind, we're talking about impaired judgment or negative thinking, indecision, distress. When we're talking about emotions, anxiety, depression, anger, apathy, irritability, sometimes hopelessness. And then when it comes to behaviors, we're talking about substance abuse, loss of appetite, and alienation. And these are all things that can happen when you have this long-term release of cortisol that's causing this chronic stress in our lives that can lead to things like burnout, but just negatively impacts everything around us.
Did you guys do a study on cortisol, how long it takes to kind of take a break and kind of reset, or do we know?
No, we did not do a study on cortisol. A long time ago in Dr. Ostron's lab, one of our projects measured cortisol and melatonin levels through the saliva, but we haven't looked at that. You have normal levels of cortisol. So right now it's 5:57 a.m. where I am right now. So I should have a lot of cortisol. You get this real spike of cortisol in the morning when you first wake up, and it's supposed to be preparing you for the day. So you kind of get this spike of cortisol, this stress, what's all the things I have to do today? And it should actually slowly taper off as the day goes on, and then be really low when you're sleeping, and then spike again in the morning. And that's kind of normal. But what we're talking about with people that have this chronic stress, that are more likely to be burnt out, so we're talking about people that their cortisol levels just remain high. They don't end up falling really like they should be falling.
Yeah. The power of setting boundaries is, I've learned over the years. You want to say yes to everyone. You want to make everyone happy. You want to try your best. But some people just take advantage, or employers take advantage, or you feel like you have to go. But some patients are just, whatever you do, they're never happy. But I've
Yes.
learned saying no, setting boundaries, really is important. Let's
Oh,
talk
yes.
about that with burnt out.
Oh yeah, I think this is something that I've learned too, because early in my career, I was told the way you get your career started is you say yes to everything. An
Yeah.
opportunity comes, boom, you need to say yes. You need to be a yes man. You need to go out there and just say yes to every opportunity. This is how you grow your career. And eventually you can't keep doing that anymore. Eventually you've said yes to too many different things. You have too many things that are going on. And so now I'm starting to get to the point that I'm having to learn how to say no. And it's very difficult for me because I'm an opportunist. I like to say yes to everything. But when you do that, you're not protecting yourself. So that, when we're talking about saying no, you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your time, you're protecting your mental energy. And multitasking is kind of really a myth. Like, a lot of us think that we're really good at multitasking, but all of the research that's been done shows that humans are pretty bad at multitasking. It drains our cognitive fuel, it boosts our stress hormones, it results in worse efficiency overall. So I think it's important to try to figure out what's essential in our life, what's essential in our workplace setting, and what's not essential. Say no to the things that are not essential, delegate the things that we shouldn't be doing, or just simply say no and decline things that we should not be saying yes to. So I think that there's a lot of power in simplicity and power in clarity, and knowing when to say no is extremely important. There's a few quotes that I've had to that I read to try to remind myself of this. So, one is, no is a complete sentence. So if someone can ask you to say to do something, you just say no. That is a complete sentence. Another one says, half of life's troubles in life can be traced to saying yes too quickly and not saying no soon enough. And every time you say yes to something, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something that is important to you. And then sometimes it isn't the mountain that's ahead of you that wears you out, it's the grain in your shoe. And I think that one's so true. So the grain in your shoe is what wears you out. If you say yes to too many different things, you're adding a little pebble in your shoe every single time. You're trying to walk with all these pebbles in your shoes, and it's difficult. And it's not the mountain, it's not the big obstacle in front of you, it's that you're dragging too many things along with you that are causing pain with every single step.
Yeah. Sometimes burnout reflects on how we think about life and obstacles in front of us. How does your mindset, affect burnout? Because yeah, you're right. Like, we say yes to everything, and we do a lot. We want to prove ourselves when we're young, and be, be a part of something. But it burns you out your mindset, right? Where others are like, I don't really want to be involved.
Yeah, sometimes I think that this kind of cognitive reframing is one of the hardest things, because I feel like some of this is kind of ingrained in us. Like, you and I are both people that are very driven, that like to do work, that kind of go, 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 to the point of exhaustion. And we view challenges as opportunities. But I've learned that really kind of not everyone is like that. And I'm not saying that we have the right mentality, because I think that predisposes us to
Yeah, we
burnout,
burn out.
but which is not great. But it's trying to have this healthy balance, that you can view challenges as opportunities and kind of have that mindset, but then also, again, knowing when to say no. I think that there's wisdom in trying to figure out the right goal settings and how to prioritize certain things, but also focusing on things that are controllable. So I think I talked to a lot of people that they're burnt out at their workplace setting, and when we talk about it, they're only talking about things that they can't control, and they're saying, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, and they're only focusing on all the things that, number one, they can't control, number two, that are probably not going to change. So I think that there's it's helpful to be focusing on things that you personally can control. And then when it comes to problem solving, breaking tasks into actionable steps, not just seeing the giant mountain in front of you, but saying, I need to get to this milestone, then this milestone, then this milestone, and then I will have climbed that mountain. Another thing that I think is helpful is practicing gratitude. So trying to find things in your life, trying to find things in your work that you're grateful for, and then reminding yourself about that, reminding yourself, like I'm blessed to have this job, to be able to earn an income, to feed my family, to provide a house for my family, and focusing on things like that. I think that having that mentality is really helpful. And I think that's especially, important as we're kind of here in the holiday season, around Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and things like that. And, some people, I'm not very good at this, but, practicing mindfulness is kind of a big topic right now. Mindfulness is different for everybody. For me, it's prayer. For other people, it can be things like meditation, relaxation, and things like that.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, prayer is important and kind of, a bigger, force to help kind of, connect with. But gratitude is important too. I mean, I always said like people would complain about certain corporates and I'm like, hey, I'm very grateful to be able to go to work, have income to support my family. We don't have to go paycheck to paycheck. Work is always a positive in eye care. There's so much work to do. Yes. It doesn't matter where you want to go. There's so much different fill-in work or full-time work that it's an opportunity. We never really see an optometrist go paycheck to paycheck. And now with the economy, how things are going with AI, a lot of people that went to school and did it right, for engineering and, computer science, they're losing their jobs, right? So, and so, we're very fortunate in eye care to have this. And I know there's a lot of different stresses that we have. But yeah, being grateful to see the opportunities that we have in our practice. Like, hey, I can work as much or as little as I want, but support my family, but also do fill-in. We have opportunities to do KOL stuff, to be involved in things in the industry if you want to. Some doctors leave clinical practice, they can do research. MSL. There's a lot of different things that doctors have done, so which has been great. And it's been good because you can kind of figure out how busy you want your lifestyle to be, right? So how can doctors in busy lives like unplug and then like catch a break with work responsibilities? Like we're always on the phone, like we're always working.
I know. I think, just because I'm talking about it doesn't mean I'm good at it, but digital detox is a really, is a very valuable one. So trying to find time to unplug regularly. I mean, one thing that I try to do, and I've kind of learned this from my mother, is literally just don't take your phone places, just leave it at home. Like we'll go out to eat at a restaurant or something like that, and I'll just leave my phone at home and not even take it with me. And then it's funny because sometimes it's the restaurant that's got the QR code to scan the menu. And I say, can I ask for a paper menu? And they say, oh, just scan it, the QR code with your phone. I'm like, I don't have my phone. And then they look at you like you're crazy, but you actually will not die if you leave your phone at home. We've gone a long time without phones. It's just in recent decades that we have phones. So doing whatever you can to unplug, setting, I generally try to set Sundays as no work days. I'm not on my computer. I'm not on my phone, trying to take that time to just be with family and not staring at screens. When it comes to kind of our everyday lives, trying to find these micro breaks or micro pauses in life. I'm generally in clinic, then I have meetings over lunch, then I'm in clinic again, but sometimes I'll just set, a certain lunch as, I'm not going to do work at this lunch. I'm going to go for a walk outside. Connecting with nature can be really, really helpful, getting outside in the sunlight. There's a quote by Dwight D. Eisenhower that I love, and he says, I have two kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are never important, and the important are never urgent. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, because sometimes people come to you, urgent about something. They're like, oh my gosh, I need you to get this form back to me immediately, or I need you to do this immediately. And they're taking something that's urgent in their life and they're pushing it onto your life. And then you feel all this stress about it. Like, oh, this is important. I have to get this done. And, taking on other people's stress, maybe because somebody else's deadline's coming up and they didn't plan ahead. shouldn't be something that we're doing all the time that ends up increasing stress to our lives. And then kind of on the flip end of that, the important things should never really be urgent. If it really is important, this should be a task that we are thinking about for a while, that we're working on for a while, that we're not rushing into it, that we're not trying to just get it done as quickly as possible if it really is important. Some people talk about mindful breathing. This is something that I've started doing more. At first I thought it sounded a little bit like hogwash and things like that, but I'm always very skeptical. But I've found that there's certain breathing techniques that can be really, really helpful. I like one called box breathing that I think Megan Herring taught me. So you inhale for 4 seconds, you pause for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, you pause for 4 seconds, and you just do that a few times. And days that I'm struggling to get everything done, that I'm feeling the chaos of life and work, I find that doing that can be really helpful. And my favorite philosopher, Winnie the Pooh, has a quote that says, "Don't underestimate the power of doing nothing." So sometimes just taking a little bit of time to just sit, relax, decompress. And this is when we have our best thoughts. Sometimes this is when we get clarity in life and work and the things that are important, when we're sitting there, trying to relax, to do nothing, and just kind of thinking quietly, alone with our thoughts.
No, that's very true. That's some good ideas over the years. Just pop in your head as you relax, or sometimes I go for a walk here in Rhode Island. Well, this time of the year is kind of cold, but in the more of the spring and fall, like summer, we'll do a lot of walk, and you get a lot of energy. I think there was a study that showed like more activity in your brain as you exercise too, right? In that, but exercise is important, but sleep's important too. I know you talk about that. How critical is sleep and burnout?
Yeah, I love the topic of sleep. And I used to do a lot of sleep research in Dr. Lisa Ostrin's lab when I was working on my master's degree. It's something I'm quite passionate about, and something I also really like, which is probably why I'm passionate about. I got 9 hours of sleep last night, which is unheard of when you have twin infants. But, we know quality of sleep is strongly linked to quality of life. We also know another simple truth, which is the longer you sleep, the longer you live. I mean, sleep is unbelievably powerful for our overall health, for our stress levels, things like that. And poor sleep isn't just a symptom of burnout, it also drives your burnout. I mean, if you're not sleeping well, you're more likely to be stressed and burnt out. And then if you're stressed and burnt out, you're more likely to have problems with sleep. I mean, we really need good sleep for healthy immune function, cognitive clarity, for our emotional regulation, and our overall health and longevity. So, I mean, I think it's really important to try to establish a bedtime routine. One of the best things that we see is, it's really bad when we're varying our bedtime every single night. It's best to try to have a certain time that you go to sleep each night, a certain time that you wake up each morning, because when you throw those off a lot, that ends up causing lots of problems for us. So trying to establish a healthy bedtime routine, and then trying to protect your sleep in your environment. I mean, trying to reduce screen time before sleep, trying to set times that you're saying, I'm not going to stay up and watch this movie really late at night, knowing it's going to negatively impact my day tomorrow. I'm going to try to get to bed on time. And I think stuff like that really helps. I remember in optometry school, I actually set a pretty hard cutoff of, I was going to be in bed by 10 o'clock, regardless of if I felt like I needed to do more studying or more work. And when I set that cutoff, my grades actually went up in optometry school. I was actually studying less and my grades went up because I was prioritizing sleep.
Oh, well. Social connection's really important too, right? Like hanging out with friends. I know when they're super stressed, cortisol is going, like we disassociate, we get depressed. How important are those connections and in this burnout phase?
Yeah, this is one that's particularly challenging for me because I'm more introverted in nature. So when I'm stressed, the last thing I want to do is be around other people. But I think having mentors in life, having coaches in life to help with your career strategy is helpful. Having peers and support groups, connection amongst colleagues. Sometimes people benefit from seeing a therapist or having a counselor. It doesn't mean you're doing this long term. Can be a short-term thing to help you get through a particularly difficult phase in life. And my brother-in-law is a Christian counselor, and he helps a lot of people, and he'll work with them for a few months and then help them kind of get back on their feet and then kind of move on. And it provides tremendous benefit for them. Trying to make sure that you're finding time for family, for friends, for things like that. Strengthening relationships with colleagues. One big thing in the burnout literature is workplace civility. So, saying hi to colleagues, chatting with colleagues, trying to get to know your colleagues. We know that it takes time, and sometimes you feel like you don't have that time, but we know when you do it, it greatly impacts your quality of your work life. And then we know that social connection in general increases well-being, and just being grateful for the people around you and for the connections you have, we know is really healthy.
Yeah. Diet's important, right? When you're in like go mode, like you just eat whatever's in front, maybe fast food, try to skip meals, things like that. That's not good, right? And not getting the right vitamins. Tell us about diet and what vitamins that, doctors should be taking to kind of minimize stress and help your body.
Yeah, this is stuff I've learned through the Ocular Wellness and Nutrition Society, namely from Netta Joya. But diet actually impacts that HPA axis, so it actually helps modulate cortisol release. So what you eat directly is impacting your stress levels and your cortisol. So we know that the Mediterranean diet, we've all heard of it. We know that it's anti-inflammatory. It supports our mood. It supports our cognitive function. It decreases stress. And there's certain vitamins, things like magnesium that helps with stress, vitamin D that helps with our immune system and mood. B vitamins help modulate our stress response. Things like zinc and vitamin C helps our adrenal health and provides a lot of antioxidants. And things like this can be really helpful. And it's important for us to remember that food is actually information to our body. We're not just talking about calories. We're not just talking about fuel. It's actually information to every single cell in our body. It's information to our genes. It helps regulate our genetic expression and all of our cellular function throughout our whole body. So diet is extremely important.
Yeah. I know this, your own burnout, right, kind of prompted you to do this research, but
yes.
How was your burnout? And then what have you done to improve it? Maybe some tips for doctors that are experiencing this.
Yeah, I was not doing well a couple of years ago. With my burnout levels, I was stressed. I think kind of the number one thing is I was just irritable all the time. I was probably not a pleasant person to be around. After the results came out with our burnout study, seeing the strong connection with number of half days in clinic associated with burnout really spoke to me. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to reduce my days in clinic. So I actually went from 4.5 days a week in clinic down to 4. Now I'm actually at 3.5 days a week in clinic. And I decided I was going to prioritize things that really mattered to me more. I really enjoy doing research. I enjoy the data. I enjoy learning new things and being able to help teach people about the things that we learn. So, that's something that's important to me that doesn't give me burnout. I just think that it's fun. So I started kind of prioritizing some of those projects that I'm passionate about, all of my research related to dry eye and ocular surface disease. I've started trying to set limits on my evening work. So there's only a certain number of days per week and then per month that I will say that I'm going to have work commitments in the evening. This is so I can be spending time with family, with friends, and getting that social connection. Because exercise is so important, I actually bought a home gym. It's difficult to find time to go to the gym when you have 3 kids, 2 of which are infants. So I got a home gym and got that set up in the house to make sure I can have me time to work out. I ended up getting a scribe that helps pre-chart for all of my patient encounters. So when I enter a patient room now, the first thing I'm doing is not getting on my computer trying to pull forward all the last data and look at the last note. It's already there for me. So I can be looking the patient in the eye, talking to them. And I think that's been really helpful. And I also found on the iPhone the personal setting. So when I turn on my personal setting, it turns off my email alerts, it turns off my EHR alerts, it turns off my calendar alerts and my LinkedIn notifications. So I can't have any work reach my phone whenever I turn on that setting. And I try to turn on that setting on a lot of weekend days and in the evenings. Then I also just started using more PTO, getting more involved in my church and my community. I think it's kind of the combination of all of that has really improved my burnout.
Yeah. The take-home message I've taken is like, learn to say no, set boundaries,
Yes.
take time for yourself. I've experienced burnout over the years and And finally, like now I feel like I don't have headaches. I'm not irritable. I don't feel like it's a rush for me to do something. It can wait till the next day, right? And I
Yes.
think and for doctors, what are your final take home messages from all this research, from talking from your own experience that doctors can take from this podcast?
Yeah, final thoughts is that burnout is a huge problem in optometry. We're probably at one of the worst professions in the United States in terms of burnout, with 54% of optometrists experiencing symptoms of burnout. But we do know that burnout is preventable and it is manageable. So we really need to kind of build a toolkit. We need to figure out what works well for us. So setting those boundaries, finding the relationships in our lives that matter, finding professional support and purpose-driven work, and trying to really prioritize those things in life. And then remember, if we are burnt out, it doesn't just impact us, it impacts our family. If we're irritable, like I was a few years ago, it impacts our friends, but it also impacts our patients too. We know that providers that are burnt out don't deliver high quality patient care. Patients feel this, it affects them too as well. And we all went into optometry to provide that patient care. So if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't take care of our patients. Sometimes we have to heal the healers before the healers can heal the patients. So I encourage listeners to try to start, with small steps when it comes to burnout. Perhaps that's taking micro breaks during work, going for a walk during lunch. Perhaps it's starting to learn to say no whenever you're overwhelmed, or maybe it's a commitment to better sleep. But find things that you can do in your life that are small steps to mitigate your burnout.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for all the work that you do in dry eye and this valuable study in eye care. You contribute a lot to eye care. And I really do appreciate the work that you do, and to also call you as a friend over the years.
Thanks, Maria. I'm happy to be on.